Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Unit 5, Day 1. Today we are beginning a new unit and talking about the Civil War. Obviously, we've been talking about manifest destiny and slavery and abolition and a lot of things that are leading up to kind of this culmination of a war between the North and the South. And we're going to start looking today at some of the things that potentially led to that starting. Now, first thing I want you to do with your journal is tell me what do you already know about the Civil War or the causes thereof, and then talk to me about what you would like to learn about the causes of the Civil War. Like, what are some things that you would like to know about and have explained to you how things happened with the Civil War. And then as we go through, I'd like for you to tell me what you have learned about the Civil War, okay, specifically about the causes of the Civil War. And you'll need to come back to your journal after you listen to this lecture. Now, today we're going to be talking about rising tensions. Okay, so a lot of crises and various things going on during this time. Now, one of the first things that we're going to talk about today is the problems that slavery itself and the issue of slavery is causing. Elias Lovejoy, an abolitionist printer in St. Louis, he was printing a lot of pamphlets and newspapers and things that were promoting abolition, which upset a lot of Southerners, as you can imagine, and they kept destroying his presses. And when I say presses, I mean like printing presses, like print off these letters or newspapers. He gets a new one and is murdered while trying to protect it. And his death is going to kind of be one of those things that we look at as a cause of just these aggressive Southerners led to the North and the South in other areas to realize, okay, hey, maybe we need to do something about this, or maybe they are trying to silence our voice or take us over or try to hurt our economy or hurt us. It shocks the nation nonetheless. He was killed defending his freedom of speech, and that in turn sides more with the government. And as a cause or as an effect of this, it boosts abolition. People, hey, we can't start killing other Americans, and we can't kill each other over this issue. Like maybe these abolitionists are right. The problem during this period of time is there's just a series of weak presidents that won't stand up and really do anything one way or the other with slavery or the issues that are rising in the country. And they do very little to prevent more sectionalism from happening. From Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, all the way to James Buchanan, there's just not a lot being taken care of. As a president, the last president that we really have that does anything is James K. Polk, who was the leader in the Mexican-American War. And then when Lincoln is elected, that's really going to kind of be the start of Civil War. Now, the big question we have here, and we just finished the Mexican-American War, is what type of state is California going to be? And funny enough, if you look at California as a state even today, it's such a large state with very big populations in different areas of the state. It tends to kind of be very split on a lot of issues. None more so than it was in this day, okay, when people were saying that the Missouri Compromise should determine that it is at least in part a slave state. A free state, because a good portion of California is above the line, the 3630 line that said it would be a free state. The problem is there was a good portion south of it that meant it could be a slave state. It essentially split the line. You can't ask for a more controversial setup. Now, the other problem with this, going back real quick, is that the Missouri Compromise was for the Louisiana Territory. It wasn't for this area that has now been taking over that was originally Spain's land or eventually Mexico's land. Now it is American land, and there was no precedent for this. Now, Stephen Douglas is going to write a compromise known as the Compromise of 1850, funny enough. And some of the key leaders that helped push this through was Henry Clay, John C. Calhoun, and Daniel Webster. And Douglas is going to get the compromise passed through Congress. And he does this by getting each part of the bill individually passed to ensure that he could get support from both sides. And what they do is they break up the bill into different parts, is that the North gets this and the South gets this. The North gets that, the South gets this. And he did that so that there's a lot of new blood in Congress during this time. As you see in the notes, many of the above leaders are old, tired, and they're nearing their death. And honestly, they're at the point where they can't keep doing this. And so for Douglas, it was important that even with their sponsorship of this bill, that he made sure that both sides were on board. Now, what does the North get? What does the South get? Boom. Compromise of 1850, you got California as a free state. That's a North thing. Slave trade banned in Washington, D.C. That's a North thing. However, popular sovereignty will reign in the land taken from Mexico. That leaves all the area that was just taken from the Mexican cession. That is going to leave all that land open for slavery. Also, stricter fugitive slave laws. That's important as well, because that means that now Southerners can enforce getting their slaves back who run away. And you're going to see that becomes a bigger problem as we go on. Now, here's kind of a view of the country right now and what it looks like. I know the map's a little blurry. But you can see California's a free state. Utah, New Mexico are both territories, all that area right now. Eventually, those will become multiple states. And then you still have this unorganized territory in the middle that is obviously a free territory, so to speak, but there's going to start being some arguments over to whether that should or should not continue to be free territory. And what's going to really be the problem is it's going to get into whether Missouri Compromise is still a law or not. Now, the Fugitive Slave Law that was passed, it was passed and provided for the recovery of escaped slaves. And slave catchers actually had to appear before a judge and make the legal claim that their slave had run away. The biggest issue here is that judges were paid $10 if they ruled that a black person was a slave. Didn't matter whether they had proof, documentation, anything like that. As long as they ruled that that black person was a slave, they were paid $10. If they ruled they weren't, they were only paid $5. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems a little bit of a kind of a feeding corruption there if you pay somebody more for ruling one way versus another. Slavery was finally, however, seen very, very up close in the North, and they saw how these slaves were being treated, and that especially this time, when you get the last kind of 20 to 30 years of history, it's really where we get a lot of the violence with slavery because, you know, you had Nat Turner's Rebellion, you've had people trying to take slavery away, and it's almost like Southerners tried to tighten their grip over their slaves because they didn't want them to be taken away. Now, here are some posters, and I'll let you pause, and if you want to read those, you can. But these are posters that would have been posted up across the North and the South trying to get their slaves back. And this was, as with the Fugitive Slave Law, comes wanted posters. You can also read this. This was for a man and his wife. And, you know, the value of these slaves, I would tell you, you ought to go type in Google $2,000 in 1860 today and see how much money those two slaves were actually worth to that owner. Okay, it's a staggering amount of money is how much people were paying for slaves in that time. Now, the North, as a result of the Fugitive Slave Law, are going to begin passing personal liberty laws, and they wanted to pass these laws against the South in reality, but they want to pass it for fugitive slaves because this would allow them to protect runaway slaves, and it guaranteed these slaves jury trials that generally Northern lawyers would drag out so that the slaves could continue living in the North free from their masters. Now, that is one of the ways that the North is fighting back. The problem during this time is that the Whig Party is changing, and Zachary Taylor, who was a Whig, died in office from an inflamed stomach. He was bled to death and given opium, just basically the way that, they treated him, ended up killing him. His successor, Millard Fillmore, did support the Compromise of 1850, but the problem is the Whig leaders are dying. And Henry Clay and Daniel Webster are going to die soon after the Compromise is passed, which means now this Whig Party is going to kind of go off the scene, and you're going to see this new political party form. Now, one party that forms is the Free Soil Party, which had already began to kind of form during this time, and it was a political party that opposed the extension of slavery into the territories, that all of these territories that are forming need to be free, and they nominated Martin Van Buren as their candidate to run for president, which is really funny considering that Martin Van Buren was the one who carried out the Trail of Tears and the Indian Removal Act. So the same person that's calling for free soil is also the same person that carried out that. But anyways, it's kind of ironic. You also had the Know Nothing Party, and they filled the gap and became a second political party, though they were short-lived. And the basis of their party was nativism, and they were very much anti-immigrant and extreme nativist. Okay, they did so much as to put a monument up to Washington that he was the first American, and this is our land, and that we got to be careful of foreign influence and these people coming into our country. And funny enough, guys, if you look at today's society, there's a lot of people you could call Know Nothing party members because they're kind of supporting the same thing, that we need to keep people out from other countries. Now, the final party that kind of forms out of all of these parties trying to pop up during this time is the Republican Party. And those that did not wish to join the Democrats had to find a new party, and you had the Know Nothings, the Free Soilers, the Whigs. The Whigs are dying off. Free Soilers are kind of, this is a new party. Then you have the Know Nothings, like they're against immigrants. We got to figure out, what can we all stand on? And so what happens is you get all of these people into one group, and it becomes the Republican Party. Now, most Republicans wanted to stop slavery from expanding. The Republican Party at this time was against slavery. The Democratic Party was supporting slavery. After the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854, which we'll talk more about, the Republican Party forms around several issues, abolition being one of the biggest, specifically there in the territories and all this land. War hero John C. Fremont, who had fought in California and fought in the Mexican-American War, was the first candidate for president from this political party. Now, these Northerners were against slavery continuing, but it's also important to note that there was Northerners who did support slavery, and for selfish reasons. They supported slavery because they might compete against them for jobs if they're freed. You have groups of slaves, guys, that if they're free, they're going to have jobs. Well, let's be honest. Most of them probably don't want to continue to stay in the South on these farms, which is, we'll talk about that more with Reconstruction and into American II. But they also don't want to free these slaves because the only jobs they're really going to come after most likely are going to be these factory jobs. So you've got kind of some different views there and some things that people are not quite together on. Now, your questions for the day, what were the four components of the Compromise of 1850? What does popular sovereignty mean? What happens to the Whig political party? And was there a need for the Republican Party to be formed? Okay, and then here are your three vocabulary words. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, I will talk to you soon.